các đại biểu từ Cục Quản lý Khám chữa bệnh, từ Trung tâm Dự phòng và Kiểm soát Bệnh tật Hoa Kỳ, từ tổ chức PATH, tiến sĩ Vlademir Cantarelli tham gia buổi học số 2 khóa tập huấn trực tuyến xây dựng báo cáo kháng sinh đầu tích lũy. Xin được thông báo với các anh chị học viên là ban tổ chức sẽ cấp chứng chỉ hoàn thành khóa học cho những học viên đủ 3 điều kiện như sau. Thứ nhất là tham dự đủ 3 buổi học. Thứ hai là hoàn thành 80% bài đánh giá cuối khóa, có nghĩa là đúng vào khoảng 16 trên 20 câu hỏi. Và thứ ba nữa là điều kiện thứ ba rất là quan trọng, đấy là bệnh viện các anh chị làm việc phải gửi cái bản báo cáo kháng sinh đầu tích lũy cho ban tổ chức vào cái ngày mà cuối buổi học hôm nay chúng ta sẽ thống nhất là ngày nào. Việc tham dự của buổi 1, buổi 2 ấy, thì sẽ được xác nhận thông qua cái việc hoàn thành đánh giá đầu khóa và cuối khóa. Cũng xin lỗi các anh các chị là Zoom không cho phép chúng tôi liệt kê toàn bộ cái học viên để mà nhận dạng học viên ạ, nhận dạng xem từ đấy là ai ạ, thì là chúng tôi không cho phép làm như vậy. Thế cho nên là chúng tôi phải dựa vào cái Google Form. Và vì thế là có những người tham gia buổi 1 hôm qua ấy, thì nhưng mà lại không làm cái pre-test thì sẽ không có tên ở trong cái không đủ điều kiện ạ. Còn buổi thứ 3 thì sẽ không có pre-test hay là post-test, thì ban tổ chức sẽ có một cái link điểm danh vào đầu buổi học. Về đánh giá cuối khóa học ấy thì sẽ được thực hiện vào buổi học hôm nay. Là cuối buổi học hôm nay thì chúng ta sẽ làm cái đánh giá cuối khóa, vì là chúng ta kết thúc cái phần lý thuyết ở buổi hôm nay. Hôm qua thì chúng ta còn 2 câu hỏi chưa được trả lời, và trong đó thì có một câu hỏi qua Zalo. Xin lưu ý các anh các chị rằng là nên đặt câu hỏi trong chat box để được trả lời luôn trong buổi học ạ. Chứ không nếu như mà trong Zalo thì sẽ bị miss mất ạ, bị bỏ qua mất ạ. Các câu hỏi chưa trả lời thì sẽ được trả lời vào cuối buổi học hôm nay. Trong trường hợp hôm nay mà vẫn chưa giải đáp hết thì ban tổ chức có nhiệm vụ sẽ ghi chép lại toàn bộ những câu hỏi chưa trả lời để tiến sĩ Vlad sẽ tiếp tục trả lời các anh chị vào buổi học tháng 8, hoặc là qua email nếu trước cái buổi đó cũng chưa trả lời hết. Trước khi mà vào buổi học chính thức thì chúng ta xem lại cái hướng dẫn sử dụng chức năng phiên dịch trong cái app Zoom ạ. Cho chị xin đấy. Thế thì không biết là các anh các chị đã đây ạ. Các anh chị nhìn lên trên màn hình Zoom ạ, thì chúng ta có một cái interpretation ạ, cái biểu tượng của phiên dịch đây ạ. Thế khi mà các anh chị click vào đấy thì nó sẽ có 3 lựa chọn. Nếu các anh chị chọn off có nghĩa là nghe toàn thể và không nghe được phiên dịch, là phiên dịch tiếng Việt tiếng Anh gì cũng không nghe được. Còn nếu như mà các anh chị muốn nghe tiếng Anh thì vào cái phòng tiếng Anh, lựa chọn thứ 2. Còn lựa chọn thứ 3 là tiếng Việt. Ta rõ chưa ạ? Tất cả mọi người thì đã có được cái phần phiên dịch chưa ạ? Cũng xin lỗi của anh các chị là chúng tôi có ghi âm lại cái bài các buổi học. Tuy nhiên thì các buổi học ngày hôm qua thì là ghi âm bằng tiếng Anh. Đấy, thì nó có một cái điểm yếu như vậy. Còn hôm nay thì chúng tôi sẽ cố gắng ghi âm cả hai, cả tiếng Anh và tiếng Việt. Xin thông báo như vậy thôi ạ. Và bây giờ thì tôi sẽ xin share cái màn hình của thầy Vlad để chúng ta để thầy Vlad tiếp tục tập huấn ạ.
Yes.
Xin hỏi các anh chị đã nhìn thấy màn hình bài học chưa ạ?
Yes, it's okay. Yeah, it's projecting. So we should go to slide 35.
Okay.
Yes, that's it. So good morning, xin chào, everybody. It's a pleasure to be here again. Morning for you, late night for me, but it's a pleasure. So let's continue with yesterday. I think I presented a lot of different information. some of which may be very new for you, especially those that never did cumulative antibiogram. So today we will continue this slides. We have another section with same amount of slides from yesterday, but today we are going to go maybe to some of the concepts that we already mentioned yesterday, just to remind you. And also we are going to go through several examples of how to use and how to present cumulative antibiogram. So this first slide is data analysis for preparation of the routine antibiogram. And we talk about how do we do the calculations that we see in those tables. And so you have to remember that what we are going to record is the percentage of isolates that is susceptible to the antimicrobial agent that is listed there. And the percentage of isolates that have intermediate interpretation, they are not part of the susceptibility statistic. So we only include those that are truly susceptible. Intermediate, resistant, dose dependent, some other categories we are not included in the table. Later on, I will talk a little bit about susceptible dose dependent. This is a new category in the CLSI document that we may want to display in our tables, but this is a special case. And just a reminder that all the interpretations are based on the most current updated CLSI document, the M100 document. But at the same time, when we say the total number of isolates that we included there, so that means that number means all isolates, susceptible isolates, intermediate isolates, resistant isolates, and so on. So what we call the N, the total number, is the total number of isolates, but the percentage represents only susceptible strains. Next slide, please. Here is a slide that shows you how to interpret MIC, minimal inhibitory concentration. We call it also MIC, because I think most of you are not doing the dilution, the broth dilutions, but we are instead using the gradient strips like E-test or some other strips that contains a gradient of the antimicrobial agent. And sometimes, or most of the times, the indication on top of those strips says numbers like this one and that you see on the left side. For example, 0.015 microgram per ml, 0.125 microgram per ml. That means 3 decimal points. And I have to remind you that when we express MICs, we should use only up to the 2nd decimal point. So if you read on your strip 0.015, you should report 0.01. If you read 0.125, you should report only 0.12 microgram per ml. And why is that important? Is because if you add the 3rd decimal point, maybe your interpretation will be affected by that. For example, let's give an example of any antibiotic that the MIC value equal or lower than 0.12 is considered susceptible, and between 0.25 and 2 is going to be intermediate. So if you have a MIC and you read it 0.12, it should be interpreted as susceptible. But if you read 0.125, you put the 5 at the end, this is greater than 0.12, and maybe you think this is not susceptible. Maybe some people will think this is more towards the intermediate category, and then probably interpret this as intermediate. So this can generate some misinterpretation. So that's why we should always read up to the second decimal point. Next slide, please. Again, if you remember, or if you know how true MIC is determined with the broth dilution into the test tubes, it is a twofold dilution that we use for any antimicrobial agent. So usually it is a twofold dilution from 1 microgram, then you have 2 micrograms, 4, 8, 16, 32, or below 1 is 0.5, 0.25, and so on. But when you have the strips, the e-test or equivalent, you may have intermediate numbers like 1.5, 3, and 6 micrograms, for example. And if you go to the package insert of e-test, for example, the instruction there is that whenever you have these intermediate numbers, you should round up the number to the next valid MIC value. For example, if you read 6 microgram, 6 is not a valid number, so you should round it up to 8. If you read 1.5, and you should consider this equal to 2 micrograms per ml. In a real true MIC, that's what happened. So this is the same thing you have to do for reporting the MIC for the patient, and also to interpret MICs to be used in your cumulative antibiogram. So do not forget that you still can record like 6 microgram per ml just for your own record, but for patient report, you should always do, like I said, round up. For example, if you have 6 microgram, then you will report 8 microgram, and then you will interpret and see if 8 microgram correspond to susceptible, intermediate, or maybe a resistant interpretation for that drug. Next slide, please. This table in this slide is going to show you how to present data for Staphylococcus aureus. Staphylococcus aureus, if you remember, can be methicillin-resistant Staph aureus, or MRSA, or methicillin-susceptible Staph aureus, like MSSA. And usually, it is a good practice to separate MRSA and MSSA, so you know the percentage of each one of them that is isolated in your laboratory or in your hospital. When you prepare the table like this one, you may choose to present all Staph aureus. Like in this example, you have 1,317 strains, and you also have separate lines here showing MRSA 449, MSSA 904. The numbers, if you add MRSA plus MSSA, is a little bit different from the total Staph aureus, because some of them in this lab were not classified as MRSA or MSSA. But usually this number should be, when you add, it should give you the total number of Staph aureus that you isolate in your hospital. And the other thing that you should pay attention is that, because this is MRSA, it means that it is totally resistant to oxacillin and methicillin. So you can see that oxacillin column here says R. There's a letter R. That means R means, if you go to the footnote, it means intrinsic resistant, because MRSA is a natural or intrinsic resistance to oxacillin and penicillin, for example. It shouldn't show any susceptibility here. On the other way around, for MSSA, by definition, all MSSA are susceptible to oxacillin. So you see 100% susceptibility to MSSA. And for the other antibiotics, it shows a different percentage of susceptibility, because this is what we see in the antibiogram. Next slide, please. This is the same kind of table, just showing how to present data for enterococci. Maybe your laboratory is able to identify the two main species of enterococci, that is Faecalis and Fascium. So if you do that, you can separate those strains, because they are a little bit different in terms of susceptibility to some antibiotics. So like in this example, it is separated. You have Faecalis, Fascium, and then you have all enterococci, including Faecalis, Fascium, and other species that you may or may not identify. They are all added together here. So total enterococci for this lab is over 1,500 strains, Faecalis 77, Fascium 261. And you can see that this will reflect the differences in susceptibility to different antimicrobial agents. For example, in this lab, only 13% of Fascium is susceptible to vancomycin, compared to 95% that is susceptible to vancomycin. So this is interesting data, because, for example, for this hospital, if you isolate enterococci and it is Faecalis, there is a 95% chance that it's gonna be susceptible to vancomycin, as opposed to only 13% susceptibility to vancomycin in case of the Fascium species. So this will give you, if you have the identification, this will give you a pretty good idea about the susceptibility profile of that enterococcal species. Next slide, please. This is also another example. And in this example, we are talking about Streptococcus pneumoniae. And what is different here from the other two examples is that for strep pneumo, we have two different interpretations. We have breakpoints for isolates from meningitis and isolates from non-meningitis cases. So you may want to present both in your table, like the example that is given here. Just pay attention that in this case, we have 110 strains of strep pneumo, and same number of those were interpreted for meningitis and non-meningitis, because here they are not different species; they are the same strep pneumo, but we have two different breakpoints to consider. Now, not all the antibiotics that you test against strep pneumo have meningitis and non-meningitis interpretation. Usually, this is only for cefotaxime, ceftriaxone, and penicillin. So only those three comes with the interpretation for these two different categories. The other antibiotics that you may test, they have only one general interpretation, like the amoxicillin, 94% susceptible to this drug, Clinda, Vitro, and so and vancomycin, for example. So you have 3 lines. Each one of those will represent a different interpretation for different drugs. Next slide, please. So information to consider for inclusion within specific tables. There are many different ways to present your tables and all your data, from presenting just everything in just one big table to separating your isolates into different categories like gram-negative, gram-positive. Even if you do anaerobic bacteria, you can put it in a separate table, and yeasts. If you do antibiogram for yeasts, you can also have cumulative antibiogram for that and present the data separately. You can combine gram-positive and gram-negative in just one big report. That is acceptable, but maybe that table is going to be very large, a big table, not friendly, not very good to find the data when you have so many bacteria in just one table. Perhaps the most convenient way, and that's what I saw when a hospital in Hue developed their own cumulative antibiogram. They separate gram-positive from gram-negative, and even within the gram-negative bacilli, you can separate Enterobacteriaceae like E. coli, Klebsiella, Enterobacter. Those are more frequent ones. From non-glucose fermenters, for example, you can have Acinetobacter baumannii, Pseudomonas aeruginosa separated from the other Enterobacteriaceae. This is another way to present the data, and depending on how big your table is going to be, how many bacteria strains you are going to add to your tables. And remember that this will depend on having the enough number of isolates for each bacteria. And if you remember from yesterday, you should have at least 30 isolates with full identification and antibiogram to be included in the cumulative antibiogram. You can use alphabetical order or list the organisms by prevalence with the higher number of isolates on the top. So this is all these different variations are acceptable. Next slide, please. So this table is just an example of a table that you may want to develop. In this example here, this is table number 11 from the document M39. And this part of the table shows gram-negative organism. And you can see that here they are listed by genus and species in alphabetical order. So you have Acinetobacter baumannii on the top, followed by Citrobacter, Enterobacter, E. coli, for example. And the last one should be around Stenotrophomonas maltophilia. Haemophilus influenza is also included because this is a gram-negative bacilli, but it's kind of a special organism, a fastidious organism, so it was left at the bottom of this list. And usually we do not perform a full susceptibility test for Haemophilus. Most of the labs, at least the labs that I know, they will just perform a beta-lactamase test. So you will just say how many % of Haemophilus influenza in your hospital produce beta-lactamase as opposed to those that are negative for beta-lactamase. That kind of data you can also present in that way. Next slide, please. So next slide is just a continuation from the previous table, showing on top here the gram-positive, again following alphabetical order with the enterococci at the top, followed by the Staphylococcus aureus, other coagulase negative, Strep pneumo, other Streptococcus. And in case of this laboratory here, they also have some anaerobes and yeast listed in this table. So it becomes a very big table if you consider that also you have to add all the different antibiotics that you test for all of them. I have examples of that in the following slides. And then it also recommends, for example, that in the case of enterococci, you separate the species like Fecalis and Fission, those that are more common. Same for MRSA and MSA, as we have already discussed. Next slide, please. So again, just a reminder from yesterday, you have to include only bacteria with 30 or more isolates of a given species. And I think you remember that I said this is the first isolate for the first specimen coming from the patient, and you should never use a second isolate from the same patient, or if the patient is hospitalized more than once, you have to exclude that patient and not use its isolates anymore in your cumulative antibiogram. And of course, there was a question yesterday towards the end of the presentation asking about isolates that are very important for you, and you cannot have 30 or more isolates to make the cumulative antibiogram. And the example, I know that the bacteria that is a perfect example for you is Burkholderia pseudomallei, that some labs will isolate now and then. Perhaps if you consider that only the first isolate for the patient, for each patient, then maybe you don't have more than 30 isolates in 1 year. So how can we show the results of cumulative antibiogram for those that have less than 30? I can tell you right now is that most of the organisms that you have just a few isolated in 1 year, they are not very important. So you can just leave them aside. But for those that are significant in your region, like Burkholderia pseudomallei, also maybe Chromobacterium violation, and if you want to add this, there are some ways to overcome this, the fact that you don't have 30 isolates. I will come back with some other slides that will show you options if you want to include those strains. But whenever you use less than 30, one thing that you should do is to add footnotes to alert the physicians and the ones that are using your cumulative antibiogram data that you have used less than 30 isolates for that particular strain of bacteria. Next slide, please. You have to include agents that you test in your routine. And you also have to consider agents that are available in your facility, in your hospital, because if you have some antimicrobial agent that is not available, it doesn't make sense to have the result, because that facility won't be able to offer that to the patients. So I think this is kind of obvious situation. When you list all the antimicrobial agents in your tables, you can list them by alphabetical order, like you do with the bacterial strains, or you can group all the antibiotics by classes, putting all the antibiotics that are from the same classes together. So there are different ways to present this data. I will show you some examples in the next few slides. Next slide, please. So here, it's some steps that you should follow when you present the data on your tables. Again, you have the numbers that is there in those columns, and lines are the percentage of susceptibility for each organism antimicrobial combination. So this is what it should represent. So never add intermediate or resistant percentage there. If you have for a specific antimicrobial agent, if you have an organism that is naturally resistant to that drug, that means the organism has intrinsic resistance to that drug, then you should add or express that by placing an R, letter R. This, I already showed this to you in the past slides. A dash like this one is used to indicate that you are not testing that antimicrobial agent for that organism. So sometimes, for example, first generation cephalosporins and Salmonella, you don't test. So you just put a dash to indicate that this antibiotic is not adequate for that isolate. There are some other notations that might be added. For example, they suggest that you add NR. NR means not routinely reported. If you have a drug that you do not report every time, just for if it is just for special requests, you put NT. So NT means that you have that drug, you don't test every time, but if the physician wants you to test, it is available and it will be tested on request. And also SP is a little bit more tricky. This is when you are you're not testing that drug, but you will be inferring the susceptibility by the result of another drug, a similar drug. So these are different notations that you may add to your table. Next slide, please. Just a few words on this new CLSI category called SDD. SDD means susceptible dose dependent. For some drugs, intermediate category was replaced by SDD because SDD means that if you increase the dose of that drug, it may be useful for the treatment of the patient's infection. So you can see that this is a good example of this category is for cefepime. As you can see in this table, showing one example, and Enterobacter cloacae. In this case, cefepime, they combined the percentage of S plus STD. And also they show the percentage of S susceptible alone. So you can see that out of 622 strains that they collected data from, cefepime, if you consider only the percentage of susceptible strains, 79% will meet that criteria. Whereas if you combine those strains that are susceptible plus those that are susceptible dose dependent, so you will increase the use of cefepime to 87%. 87% of the strains will belong to these two categories, and the drug can be used. But it is, you see that they add some comments in the footnotes, and that is an explanation of what it means, for example, cefepime alone and cefepime when they combine with STD, what is the dosage that they should use, and things like that. So these footnotes here are coming from the notes of M100 CLSI document. Next slide, please. I'm not sure if you have noticed, but there is a new interpretative category from CLSI. This is an intermediate that the symbol is I, with the symbol here is in English we call it caret. That means it is a different intermediate from the ones that from the intermediate that we were used to, because this is used only for some antimicrobial agents that we know will be concentrated in the urine. So antimicrobial agents that we use to treat urinary tract infections, and because they will concentrate inside the urine, they may be used for the treatment of the patient. So one such example is amoxicillin clavulanate, amoxiclav, that if you consider for urinary tract infection, sometimes you will be interpreted as this I caret, and then you may want to display this in your cumulative antibiogram table. Okay, but if you do that, the better way to do that is to take isolates and separate that isolates from urinary tract infection and other sources. And then for urinary tract infections, you combine susceptibility rates with the intermediate rates. For example, here, if you take E. coli isolates that are susceptible, truly susceptible to amoxicillin clavulanate, it makes up to 65%. And 20% of those E. coli's, when you do interpretation, they fall into this I caret category. So if your E. coli is from uncomplicated urinary tract infection, you can say that 65 plus 20, 85% are susceptible to amoxicillin clavulanate. But again, this 20% here is only to be considered for urinary tract infection isolates and for some antibiotics, not for systemic infection like bloodstream infection or any other infection caused by these bacteria. Next slide, please. So this is another example of special situation. This is with this antibiotic here that says cefazolin. Maybe you use this in your lab. Cefazolin can be used to treat some systemic infection caused by susceptible organism. And then in that case, to be considered susceptible, it has to have MIC equal or less than 2 micrograms. But if you are using cefazolin to treat urinary tract infection, then you will consider susceptible if the MIC is much higher, equal or less than 16 micrograms per ml. So you have two different interpretations based on different MICs, based on where the isolate is coming from. And in that case, you can express that in your table using two different columns as shown in this example. You can see that this is just one organism here that is an example, E. coli, number of strains 1,978. You can see that if the E. coli is interpreted according to the cefazolin systemic interpretation, you have 68% that is susceptible to this drug. But if you interpret according to the urine interpretation, then because the MIC is higher, you also have higher rates of susceptibility. But this can be used only for urinary tract infections. Next slide, please. So here again, this is that situation where we have less than 30 isolates for a bacterium that is very important for you. I gave you the example of Burkholderia cepacia, or sorry, Pseudomallei. And then how can we overcome this situation? So potential solutions for this situation would be collect data from more than 12 consecutive months. So usually the 30 isolates should come from 1 year period. But if you don't have 30, you can go over some other months. Let's say you will try to get your 30 isolates from the past 18 months or from the past 24 months, so 2 years in space, and combine all the results so that you have at least 30 isolates to make your interpretation more how can I say, true, for example, and not biased towards false, susceptibility, for example, when we use or resistance when you use just few isolates. But whenever you do that, remember that you have to add a footnote to indicate the fact that you are not collecting this data from 1 year period, but also, but you are doing this from 1.5 or even 2 years. There are some situations, for example, you have a more rare bacteria like Citrobacter. If you cannot separate, or if you cannot get 30 isolate for different species of Citrobacter, then you can just combine them as Citrobacter sp, and within this you will add Citrobacter freundii, Koseri, or any other species. So by combining those species, then you increase the number of isolates, and then you get more than 30. Another way of doing this, of getting more than 30 isolates, may be to combine your results with the results of some other hospital that is nearby. So you have to have an agreement with that other hospital or that other institution, and you both share your data. So maybe combining your results, you're gonna have more than 30 isolates. This can also data for susceptibility percentage can also be gathered from other sources like guides from national institution or even international institutions. But the ones that I think are more meaningful is when we have the true data from our region, our hospital, that is the best, available data that we may have. Next slide, please. Sometimes this slide is just to remind you that sometimes some breakpoints may be changed, may be updated during the 1 year period. Maybe after 6 months or 8 months that we are using some breakpoints, CLSI will publish a new document, and maybe that breakpoint will change. If the breakpoints change, sometimes also the interpretation, like susceptible, intermediate, or resistant, also change. So you don't need to go back and change the whole document, your whole table, and reinterpret the data for the past 12 months according to the new breakpoints. What is suggested is that if that happened, you add a note here. For example, in this table, this note here says that ceftriaxone and meropenem changed the breakpoint. So the data that are presented here for ceftriaxone and for meropenem is not covering the whole year, but maybe for the past few months, breakpoints were updated. So this will reflect that change in the breakpoints. Next slide, please. This is an interesting example. I think we also mentioned something about that yesterday. Sometimes we test some antibiotics in very specific situation. For example, here is E. coli. We have 3,636 isolates. And if you see ciprofloxacin, susceptibility to ciprofloxacin is 92%. When you see levofloxacin, the susceptibility is 80%. And this is a little bit strange when we examine cumulative antibiograms like this. You expect, and that levofloxacin should be a little bit better than ciprofloxacin. So you would expect that the percentage of susceptibility to levofloxacin would be higher or equal or higher than the cipro. But in this case, it's lower. So why is that? That happens because this lab here, they test levofloxacin only when cipro is resistant, for example, or only, in this case, only when the panel that they are using is urine. So by testing this in a very specific situation, actually the number of isolates that were tested against levofloxacin is not 3,636, but if you can see the note here, it says that only 292 strains were tested against levofloxacin. And probably among those 292 isolates that were tested with levofloxacin, most of them, or some of them, were much more resistant than the general strains that were tested with cipro alone. So this will decrease the susceptibility to levofloxacin. So this is sometimes we have this artificial situation that looks like one antibiotics that should be better than the other one appears worse in terms of susceptibility. Next slide, please. in this situation here, this is the continuation of the levo and cipro case that I presented before. If you correct the situation, for example, if you can match isolates from the same, both that were tested in the same way, every time you test cipro, you test levo, and you take only those isolates, you can see that the percentage of susceptibility will be much closer to what should be the real situation. For example, in this case, showing only E. coli and 3,636 isolates from the previous table, cipro was 92% susceptible, levo was less than that. But if you take E. coli from non-urine, this is the 292 isolates that they tested both cipro and levo, you see that in this case, both display this almost, or in this case, the same percentage of susceptibility. Because in this case, all strains here were tested by both antibiotics, whereas in urine here, the remaining 3,417 tested only against ciprofloxacin, showing 93% susceptibility. But you put a dash here because these were not tested against levofloxacin. So maybe it's better this way. When you compare two different antibiotics like these ones, yeah, you have to make sure that both were tested for those isolates. Next slide, please. This is just to show that sometimes also you may change your panel of antibiotics during the year. Sometimes, you are going to add a new antibiotic that came, into the hospital in the past few months. So in this example, this is represented by cefepime. It wasn't used for the whole period of the cumulative antibiogram. It was just added later. Then there's not much, thing that you can do here. You just add, like here you see cefepime on the second column against different gram-negative bacteria. The only thing that is recommended here is that you add a note saying that cefepime should not be compared with the other agents because cefepime was not tested on all these isolates. So probably, for example, in Enterobacter cloacae, 44 isolates, just a few of them were tested against cefepime, and so forth and so on. So just next year, when you do your cumulative antibiogram again, when you review, then you will have the data for the whole year. That will be correct. Next slide, please. This slide is just to show you that in your tables, you may want to highlight the prevalence of some very special organisms, usually the multi-drug resistant organisms. And you can present the data showing the percentage of those organisms in your institution. For example, in the gram-positive cocci, you may want to inform the hospital that fecalis less than 1% are VRE, or for fission, 48% are VRE. So every time the doctors receive a result saying that the isolate is fission, maybe there's almost 50% chance of that one be enterococci that is resistant to vancomycin, as opposed to less than 1% for fecalis. You may want to inform you know, the infection control, your doctors, that 40% of all Staph aureus that are isolated in your institution represents MRSA. So that will give you an idea. Every time you have a Staph aureus, there may be a 50% chance or almost 50% chance of being MRSA. Of course, that will depend on each institution. So that's why it's important to inform that. Same thing for gram-negative bacilli. In that case, you may want to show how many percent of those isolates like E. coli, Klebsiella, are multi-drug resistant. Like in this example, 3% of E. coli are multi-drug resistant, as opposed to Klebsiella pneumoniae, that is 6%, for example. But you can also add other important things. What is the percentage of you know, gram-negative bacilli that is resistant to carbapenems? What is the percentage of gram-negative bacilli that is resistant to colistin, for example? If that is important for your institution, you can add that. Next slide, please. This is another example. In this table, it is just a suggestion for you to present data on multi-drug resistant organisms. In this case, it will represent Klebsiella pneumoniae. And because Klebsiella pneumoniae, we know that a lot of isolates will produce, for example, ESBL. Some will produce carbapenemase as KPC or any other, you know, metallobeta-lactamase, for example. If you want, you can separate in different lines. You can show the total number of Klebsiella and what would be the percent susceptibility for each drug overall. But you can also show, for example, if they produce ESBL. Of course, if they produce ESBL, they will be totally resistant to some cephalosporins like ceftriaxone. Here, 0% susceptibility, and they should be still 100% susceptible to carbapenems like ertapenem and meropenem. And of course, if you have a KPC producing Klebsiella pneumoniae, then you can see that the susceptibility rates for almost all the drugs are very, very low. In this example, the only one that is 100% susceptible is the new antibiotic combination ceftazidime avibactam. This is 100% here. I can tell you that in our hospitals now we see more and more KPC producers being also resistant to ceftazidime avibactam, which is a new antibiotic combination, but it's still you see strains developing resistant to that one, which is not unexpected. Next slide, please. This slide is to show you that just remember that cumulative antibiograms can be used, or one of the main uses of this cumulative antibiogram is to guide empiric therapy during the time that doctors don't have report from your microbiology department. So sometimes because we are dealing with complicated organisms that are becoming more and more resistant, there is a need to combine antimicrobial agents. For example, combining cephalosporins with aminoglycosides, for example. So we we can try to develop a table that shows what is the percentage of susceptibility to some of the combinations that may be used in your hospital. Next slide, please. Let's see the examples. So some examples of these combinations or common combinations might be, for example, using ceftazidime with cipro, or imipenem with cipro, ceftazidime and tobramycin, imipenem with tobramycin, for example. So in your cumulative antibiogram, you should have the percentage of susceptibility to all the separate agents, cipro, ceftazidime, and tobramycin, but also you have to add the percentage of susceptibility to either or both antimicrobial agents, like we're gonna see on the next slide, please. So here is the example in this table showing, for example, ciprofloxacin alone, ceftazidime alone against Pseudomonas aeruginosa. When this lab examined 814 strains of Pseudomonas, 69% were susceptible to cipro, 80% were susceptible to ceftazidime. But you can see that here in the middle, there is a column with combined ceftazidime plus ciprofloxacin. And then it shows that for both, if you consider both antibiotics, the susceptibility rate will be increased to 86%. So that may give the doctors an indication about the possibility of combining ceftazidime and ciprofloxacin to increase the chance of achieving the cure for that infection. Same thing goes for the other ones like imipenem, tobramycin. They are here alone or in combination. You see that for some of them, the percentage of susceptibility will be increased. So this is just a suggestion. Doesn't mean that you have to do this, but if your hospital is interested in combining some of the agents, maybe you also are encouraged to produce such kind of results. Next slide, please. So sometimes, you have positive blood cultures. These are not sometimes. This is very common in the microbiology laboratory. You do blood cultures, they becomes positive. The first thing that you are going to do is a gram stain. And from that gram stain, you will get information about what kind of organism is there. Is it a gram positive? Is it in chain or cluster? Or is it a gram negative bacilli, for example? And if you, I know that you give this information right away to the physicians so that they will know what kind of organism is the cause of that bloodstream infection. And for example, you may say we isolated this positive blood culture contains gram-negative bacilli. This information will be used to guide initial therapy. And by using your cumulative antibiogram, the doctors may look at columns that says gram-negative bacilli and use that to select the most appropriated antimicrobial agent, the ones that shows good susceptibility yet to gram-negative bacilli in your institution. So because at this point you don't have the name of the bacteria yet, one thing that you can do is to combine the susceptibility results for all the drugs with gram-negative bacilli, all combined. I'll show you the table. Next slide, please. I think this is more clear. So here in this example, only piperacillin tazobactam is used as an example, and you can see in the middle column here percentage of isolates that are susceptible to pip-tazo. You have separated organisms by species like E. coli, Klebsiella, but at the bottom of this table you have the total all gram-negative bacilli from blood culture. So this data here was generated by taking the first gram-negative isolate for blood cultures only, and then calculating the percentage of those gram-negative bacilli that is susceptible to piperacillin tazobactam. So you're not, at this point, you're not taking into account the species. You're just combining all gram-negative bacilli, and you are expressing the percentage of susceptibility. So that kind of situation is useful in the example that I just gave to you. In case you have a positive blood culture for a gram-negative bacilli, the first thing that a doctor can do is to look at this column here and see what is the percentage of susceptibility that you find for your combined gram-negative bacilli. Next slide, please. So here is a full table containing all the antibiotics, not just the example that I just gave you. So instead of showing different species of gram-negative bacilli, in this line here, we have all gram-negative bacilli that has been isolated from blood culture. In this case, 313, and the percentage of susceptibility to all different drugs. Of course, some drugs for like ampicillin is very low in sensitivity, but some like ertapenem or meropenem will have very high percentage of susceptibility. So just remember that within here you have different kinds of gram-negative bacilli, from E. coli that should be more susceptible to Pseudomonas or Acinetobacter that is more resistant. But because you still don't have the identification of that organism, this may be useful data to select the initial empiric therapy for that patient. Next slide, please. This is also, again, if you don't have enough susceptibility data from your own institution, you may combine data from another institution in your area. I think that is first thing that you should do is to increase your data. The size of your data is to combine with your with the other hospital or facility in your neighborhood, because this is in the same area as you are located. So maybe they have similar or very similar organisms with similar susceptibility. If you can also combine with institutions from different regions, but the chances are that if you do like that, maybe they have different patterns of susceptibility. Maybe this will affect your data. So next slide, please. We were talking about using the percentage of susceptibility to each organism antimicrobial combination to guide empirical therapy. But you may ask, what is the threshold? What is the percentage that gives me a better chance to make the right choice to treat the patient? Of course, if I have a bacteria and I see that I have 100% susceptibility for some new antibiotic, that one, if I use that one, the chances are that I will, cure that infection. But what about if I have 70% susceptibility to one antibiotic? Can I use it as empiric therapy? Should it be higher than that? What is the threshold that I should use to guide me in choosing the appropriate therapy? Actually, there is no such threshold that will be applicable to every bacteria. I give you some examples here. For example, Streptococcus pneumoniae. If you isolate strep pneumo from a meningitis sample, CSF, the WHO recommends that you only use those antibiotics that shows more than 90% or at least 9% susceptibility. So if you have a drug that is about 80% susceptibility, you should not use for this strep pneumo meningitis. For Neisseria gonorrhea, only use first-line antibiotics that shows more than 95% susceptibility. This is also recommended by WHO. So very high susceptibility rates. If you have less than that, you should not risk, you should not use. If you have a different situation like uncomplicated cystitis, urinary tract infection, and for example, you want to use trimethoprim sulfamethoxazole, if you have more than 80% susceptibility rate for that bacterial antibiotic, then in that case, you may consider that one, even though it is 80 or just above 80% susceptibility for that bacteria and that drug. And in general, for other types of infection, and that I assume it will include bloodstream infections, pneumonia, and some soft tissues infections, any other types of infection, you should choose antibiotics that shows from 80 to 90% susceptibility. That will be a threshold that are related to success of your treatment. Next slide, please. In this case here, you are showing the table with different antibiotics, but in this case, now it's a little bit different from the other one that I presented. First, if you remember, when I have a positive blood culture, first I have only an indication that this organism is a gram-negative bacilli, for example. And then, especially if now the laboratory has a MALDI-TOF or automation, it will probably identify the organism in the next few hours, and now you have the name of the organism. If you have the name of the organism, but you still don't have the susceptibility test from your lab, and you want to use your cumulative antibiogram as a guide to empirical therapy, now it becomes a little bit easier because you have the name. So now at least you know if this is E. coli or if this is Klebsiella or Pseudomonas. And then you have, now you use the different situations of your table when you have the name of the species for each line and specific susceptibility rates for each organism drug combination. So in that case, let's say the organism in that blood culture, positive blood culture, was Pseudomonas aeruginosa. So you can see that cefepime has 86% rate of susceptibility for all the Pseudomonas aeruginosa that is isolated in that hospital. If you consider piperacillin tazobacter, 92% in this case will be susceptible. So this is above 80%, 90% that I mentioned to you before. So this could be selected for treatment. Ciprofloxacin, 79, so this is lower than 80%. So probably this should be avoided. Of course, there are other options. We will discuss that. Next slide, please. So this is a summary of that table. You see pip-tazo and cefepime, as I mentioned, this between 80 and 95% susceptibility. So this could be a very good choice for Pseudomonas aeruginosa bloodstream infection, for example. So you can start with that while you are waiting for the final antibiogram from your lab. As was displayed, meropenem was even better, but in that case, meropenem, you may consider it with a broader spectrum of activity. And because you have other options, maybe you want to save meropenem for some other patients or some other types of infection. So this is options that you have as to select the appropriate agent for that infection. Next slide, please. So again, when you use your antibiogram to guide empirical antimicrobial therapy, if you know the organism and if you don't know yet the susceptibility report from your lab, you can use this to guide your therapy. For example, if you have an E. coli identified from a bloodstream infection, you can go to the table, select the drugs that are most appropriated for that one. And it will be a good practice to sit with your infectious disease team to discuss that when they because sometimes because you are going to have, for example, options that are 100% susceptible. There may be some doctors will try to go for this one, but this probably should be avoided because you should save those agents like meropenem or some of these new drugs. You should save it to patients that cannot use anything else. Whereas some drugs that shows between 80 to 9% susceptibility will be equally effective. Next slide, please. So now we have developed our tables. We decided what kind of tables we want, how we will separate gram-negative, gram-positive organisms, all the information that we want to be on those tables. Now, how can we distribute those tables to the doctors and to the hospitals? You can prepare like pocket guides. This usually is it's kind of short, so it will not contain a lot of information, but maybe only the essential information that you want to give to, for the doctors. So you can use pocket guides for that. You can also use, because this, if you are thinking about doing cumulative antibiogram once a year, You can also get those sheets and laminate, so they will last longer, and maybe you can do it over A4 type of paper, for example, and put some more data on it. Another way, next slide, please. Another way of doing this or presenting the data is to create a website, or using some applications, PDF format, smartphone. You can prepare downloadable files that doctors can download from your website or the hospital's website. This is another way to present the data. So it all depends on you. And of course, you may want to have multiple forms of distribution. So maybe you will distribute pocket guides with just essential information to be used as a reference rapid guide. But if you need the complete reference, you will have it in a bigger file, downloadable file, for example. So it all depends on the technology that you are available, and if you have people available to develop those applications, for example, for smartphones or tablets, that will be nice. But also that will depend on the collaboration that you have from your IT department or the hospital's IT department. Of course, this information, all this cumulative antibiogram, can also be and should be also distributed to not only to the doctors, but also to the infection control team, also to the epidemiologists, pharmacists, and of course, you should keep copies in the laboratory, microbiology laboratory as well, as for your reference. Next slide, please. So now we are almost finishing on the presentations from today, just showing you some examples that you will find when you go through your M39 document. So this is an example of table containing only gram-negative bacilli, alphabetic order, as I already showed you some things like this. Number of strains that were tested. You can see that all of them have more than 30. Some have thousands, like E. coli is very easy to isolate. Some others have just a few isolates, for example, Shigella, only 33. And the way they presented the antibiotics here is also alphabetical order. Amikacin on the left, followed by ampicillin, and see goes up to tobramycin at the end. So this is one way of present. You see the susceptibility, you see the R representing intrinsic resistance, and everything that I have already mentioned to you. Next slide. This is the same table. Organisms are presented in alphabetical order. They are mixed, Enterobacteriaceae and non-fermenters. But now they prefer to show antibiotics classified into their respective classes. So you have penicillin, cephalosporins, the beta-lactams together here. Followed by the carbapenems. You have the aminoglycosides in this together here, amikacin, genta, and tobra. Fluoroquinolones, you can put cipro and put levofloxacin side by side, and some others. So this is another way of presenting the data. Next slide. Here is same table, but now for showing examples of gram-positive from Enterococcus, showing different species of Enterococci. So we already mentioned this to you. Again, antibiotics are classified here into their respective classes of penicillin, cephalosporin, aminoglycoside, fluoroquinolones, etc. So also here you see percentage of susceptibility, intrinsic resistance. The dash means that antibiotic is not useful for bad bacteria. So I think we covered all this, just examples. Next slide, please. This is a table, table D2. I advise you to read this table and read. Actually, I advise you to read all the document, but especially when you go to this table here, it will show you some examples of things that are probably not correct. Like, for example, in E. coli, you have a rate of susceptibility to meropenem of 85%. At least in most of the labs, it should be close to 100% susceptibility. So maybe this 85% is not correct. Maybe there's a problem with the database. So you have possible causes listed here that could explain this wrong result. So, for example, meropenem was not tested for all isolates of E. coli, only those that were, for example, more resistant. So this will bring this susceptibility rates down. So other things that we already mentioned, like amikacin being less susceptible than gentamicin. Some other things here, for example, vancomycin, and the last one here, Streptococcus viridans, 91% susceptibility to vancomycin. That means that 9% is going to be resistant, and that is that's probably not right, because there's no reported vancomycin resistance to Streptococcus viridans. So probably this 9% were not confirmed by the lab. Probably they represent, for example, contamination of the culture with some other organism that may appear vancomycin resistant. So this table is useful because it has some examples of things that maybe are not right, and what the causes of that problem is or could be. Next slide. So that was our last slide. So this is just to remind you that you have the homework, and your homework is to start developing your own cumulative antibiogram. I think this is going to be a very good exercise for you. I know that this is a lot of work to develop, but it will show you what is the situation for the organisms in your institution. And eventually, I would advise you to have maybe in the near future, when you have developed this, a meeting with different regions of the country, and then you can compare, the susceptibility rates that you can find in your region compared to the other regions. And so I think this is the last slide, and I will now open for questions. And so we have some time for you to give me the questions, and I will try to clarify anything that was not clear enough. Thank you very much. Come on.
Cảm ơn tiến sĩ Vlad ạ. Trước khi mà chúng ta sang cái phần về hỏi đáp ấy, thì tôi xin làm rõ hơn cái phần bài tập nhóm ạ. Chúng ta nhìn những slide ở chiếu trên Zoom ấy, thì các bạn sẽ làm, các chị sẽ làm nhóm theo từng bệnh viện, sử dụng dữ liệu năm 2021 của mình. Như là chúng ta đã biết là cái dữ liệu mà nó phải mới nhất thì nó mới hữu ích cho chúng ta, nên chúng ta không sử dụng những năm trước. Cái thứ hai nữa là xây dựng một cái báo cáo kháng sinh đồ tích lũy cho đơn vị của mình. Chúng ta có thể làm hết cả 3 bảng, một bảng cho gram âm, một bảng cho gram dương, một bảng cho nấm này nọ các thứ, thì tùy chúng ta có thời gian đến đâu. Cái thứ hai nữa là phải gửi lại bài tập cho ban tổ chức chậm nhất là ngày 25 tháng 7, vì là chúng ta sẽ cần tiến sĩ Plus review cho các anh chị nếu như có đủ thời gian. Thế thì trước cái hôm mùng 1 tháng 7 mùng 1 tháng 8 là buổi học cuối cùng. Thế thì gửi cho hai cái địa chỉ email như sau ạ. Một là bác sĩ Dung của Cục Quản lý Khám chữa bệnh, và hai là cho tôi, cho bác sĩ Nga của tổ chức PAP. Ban tổ chức thì sẽ tạo một cái nhóm Zalo hỗ trợ xây dựng cái báo cáo kháng sinh đồ tích lũy này, để tất cả những cái gì câu hỏi của các chị có thể hỏi được ở trong cái link này. Các chị nên tham gia theo link ạ. Thì mời Đạt gửi cái đường link Zalo link này cho Zalo nhóm và trong chat box cho chị.
Em vừa mới gửi rồi.
Ok. Tiếp theo nữa thì bây giờ thì chúng ta là 9:31. Hôm nay là chúng ta có một cái phần liên quan đến đánh giá cuối khóa, cho nên là sẽ kết thúc vào 9:40. Thì mời các anh chị hỏi luôn bây giờ đi ạ. Nếu chưa có ai giơ tay thì Nga sẽ xin dịch xin đọc cái câu hỏi ở trong các anh chị trong chat box, được không ạ? Vâng. Thế câu hỏi đầu tiên ạ là Bệnh viện Đại học Y Dược Hà Nội có hỏi rằng là thầy giải thích thêm về khái niệm nhạy cảm phụ thuộc liều SDD ạ. Là câu hỏi này thì được đặt trước khi mà thầy giảng về phần này. Thế không biết là bây giờ Bệnh viện Đại học Y Dược của Hà Nội có còn cần trả lời nữa không ạ?
Okay.
Có còn cần trả lời nữa không ạ? Không, ok. Cảm ơn Đại học Y Dược Hà Nội ạ. Câu hỏi thứ hai là của Bệnh viện Đại học Thống nhất, Bệnh viện Thống nhất Đồng Nai ạ. Số 86% nhạy với tổ hợp là thử nghiệm in vitro hay ở đâu ra? Slide số 60 ạ.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Let me check here this slide. Yes, I think this is a little bit tricky, because when you see this slide, not that one, I think. Not this one, that is not the one that is, but the slide that should be there is ciprofloxacin, and then ceftazidime. Ciprofloxacin 69% susceptibility, ceftazidime 80%, and then when you combine both data, it goes up to 86%. Yeah, that one, right. So what need to be understood here is that you are testing cipro and ceftazidime only, and this combination here doesn't mean that you are putting in your antibiogram both drugs together. You are not doing any synergy testing or anything like that. What happens here is that when you test isolates, a lot of them will show susceptibility to ciprofloxacin, and some of them will be susceptible to ceftazidime. Some will show susceptibility here and resistant here, or maybe the contrary, susceptible here, resistant here. So what you do is you take all the number, all the isolates that are susceptible for cipro and for ceftazidime at the same time, and that then you add those numbers and you calculate the percentage. So I think the question is because when you see this, it will give you the impression that you are doing a special antibiogram, like a synergy test or something like that. But this is not the case. You are just testing the drugs separately and adding the numbers of susceptibility for both drugs. I'm not sure if this was clear for you. Yeah. Yeah. No. No. Mm-hmm. No, no, we don't do that. No. It's just the numbers of susceptibility to each one of those that we will combine. It's just numbers. We are not doing any test on a Petri dish or something like that. We are not doing that. What this combination means is that 86% will be susceptible to ceftazidime or ciprofloxacin, because what this means is that when you use combination of ceftazidime and ciprofloxacin, maybe the bacteria, in this case Pseudomonas aeruginosa, maybe this strain is resistant to ciprofloxacin, but the chances are it's gonna be susceptible to this one, or maybe it is resistant to that, but maybe it's susceptible to that one. So adding together, one or both will work. That's what it means. Okay. Sure.
Cảm ơn thầy ạ. Xin hỏi câu hỏi tiếp theo. Từ Bệnh viện Đại học Y Dược Thành phố Hồ Chí Minh, xin hỏi là cách báo cáo MIC trong kháng sinh đầu tích lũy. Với các kết quả MIC, ngoài nhạy kháng trung gian SDD ra thì có cần báo cáo thêm MIC 50, MIC 90 hay range không ạ? Ý thứ hai là ví dụ như kết quả y-test MIC bằng 6, khi trả kết quả cho người bệnh thì tăng lên 8, Thế còn mix nhập vào dữ liệu để phân tích là cho báo cáo ấy, thì là 6 hay 8 ạ?
Oh yeah, that's from the gradient, from the strips that you get in those intermediate results, right? So I think it's a good idea. Oh, yeah, I think it's a good idea always to go to the next valid number. For example, if you have 6, you go to 8. Because this is especially in the e-test, this is what it is recommended by the package insert. Yeah, the slide. So
38.
yeah,
38.
38. So if you have 38, 38 is not valid, because it should be, you always start with 1. The real MIC, you know, the valid number is 1 and multiple, 2-fold dilution from 1. So if you go up, it will be 1, 2, 4, 8, 16, 32, and 64. Okay, so if you have 38, it's greater than 32. So you should. Oh, sorry. Yeah. But anyway, for interpretation, you always round it up to the next valid microgram. Like if you have 1.5, you go to 2. If you have 3, you go to 4. And this is how you have to interpret. And in the cumulative antibiogram, you are not going to present any number. I mean, any MIC number. You are just going to present the percentage of susceptibility. So there's no need to, you know, add the number to any table. It's just something that you keep for yourself in the lab.
Còn ý 1 nữa chị Thường.
Yeah, for the patient, that's for sure. In that case, if you have the intermediate numbers, you always report the you know, the valid MIC. If you read 1.5 for the patient, you will report 2. If you have 3 for the patient, you will report 4. Okay, and then you have to go to the table to see if 2, 4, or 8 it represents, you know, what category it represents: susceptible, intermediate, or resistant for that drug.
Chị Thường ơi, còn cái ý số 1 nữa ạ.
No, for the cumulative antibiogram, no, you just interpretation. In your patient report, usually you have to report the MIC, the number, how many micrograms per ml, together with the interpretation, both.
Câu hỏi của bạn ý là nếu với các kết quả mix ngoài nhạy kháng trung gian SDD thì có cần báo cáo thêm mix 50, mix 90 hay là range không ạ? Vâng. báo cáo kháng sinh đồ tích lũy ạ.
No. Mm-hmm. Yeah, the percentage of yes, that's true. Yes. And intermediate and resistant will be considered together. We do not separate. Yeah, because when, for example, if you say in your cumulative antibiogram, if you say 80% susceptibility, it means that 20% will be either intermediate or resistant. So you don't know, but it doesn't matter. Well, what matters is the percentage of sensitivity. Yeah.
Vâng, cảm ơn thầy ạ. Bây giờ vì là thời gian có hạn, Nga chỉ có một câu hỏi nữa thôi. Nga sẽ đọc một câu hỏi nữa thôi ạ. Tất cả câu hỏi còn lại thì sẽ được ghi chép lại ạ. Của bệnh viện bệnh viện Đa khoa Thanh Hóa. Thưa thầy, có những vi khuẩn ở bệnh viện em chỉ còn nhạy cảm với kháng sinh cao nhất là 70%. Xin thầy cho gợi ý về lựa chọn kháng sinh kinh nghiệm cho trường hợp này ạ.
Yeah. Yeah, if you have very low number of or percentage of, yeah, if you have just a very low levels of susceptibility, it's gonna be very different. Usually, when we have a very resistant organisms, there are other things that are being done, like combination of different antibiotics. Usually combination, these are all empiric treatments. It will combine, for example, carbapenems with aminoglycosides like meropenem and amikacin. Sometimes they will combine meropenem with, for example, colistin. So different situations requires different combinations of antibiotics, but these combinations we cannot test its effectiveness in the laboratory. They are just empiric, and sometimes even the ones that we combine, they in vitro they are resistant when we test them separately, but when we give to the patient in a combination together with some other antibiotics, that will be effective, hopefully sometimes.
Vâng ạ, cảm ơn thầy ạ. Xin lỗi là các chị
Yeah,
em đi tiếp được chưa chị? Okay.
Yeah. Yeah, so there is not much we can do. I mean, the only thing that we could possibly do here is try to get new, for example, new antibiotics. Let's say if you are not testing ceftazidime, avibactam, maybe that will be an option for this patient. But there is not much we can do when we have a resistance to everything. That is a matter of maybe trying to get the infection control team together, trying to see if organisms are prevalent in the hospital. How can we prevent the spread of these organisms so that we are not going to spread this organism to other patients? So there's multiple things that we can do, but not very much of them will be effective. Maybe she can, or he or she can send me more details by email or by any other, and we can discuss this further some other time.
Vâng ạ, cảm ơn thầy ạ. Vậy bây giờ chúng ta đã kết thúc phần lý thuyết. Chúng ta
Ceftazidime avibactam. Ceftazidime and avibactam, yeah.
Vâng ạ, chúng ta bây giờ đã kết thúc phần lý thuyết rồi ạ. Xong chưa hả chị Thường ơi? Vâng. Vậy chúng ta đã kết thúc phần lý thuyết rồi ạ. Và đề nghị các chị học viên sẽ làm bài đánh giá post-test bây giờ ạ. Mời
Yeah, good luck.
Linh gửi cho chị cái slide hướng dẫn làm bài pre-test. Còn Đạt thì cho chị cái link Google Form lên ạ. Đạt gửi link Google Form lên em. Ok. Các anh chị đã vào được chưa ạ? Tôi xin bắt đầu tính giờ nhé. Chúng ta cũng có 15 phút như là hôm pre-test ạ. Và cũng xin khuyến khích là các anh chị cùng một bệnh viện sử dụng cùng một account để vào Zoom ạ. Thì sau khi người này làm xong thì người khác, hoặc là có thể làm song song ở trong điện thoại. Xin phép được tính giờ luôn nhé.
Okay. I wish good luck for everybody. Yeah.
Cảm ơn thầy rất nhiều ạ. Chúc thầy ngủ ngon.
Good night, everybody.
Chị Thường ơi, chị có thể nghỉ được rồi ạ. Giờ toàn tiếng Việt thôi ạ. Dạ, giờ toàn tiếng Việt thôi ạ. Cảm ơn chị. Dạ. Sau phần làm post-test thì chúng ta sẽ đánh giá buổi học và link tài liệu tập huấn sẽ được gửi lên chat box ạ. Chúng ta còn 3 phút ạ. Báo cáo kháng sinh đồ tích lũy cho năm 2021 là chọn dữ liệu của lấy mẫu từ ngày 1 tháng 1 năm 2021 cho đến 31 tháng 12 năm 2021 ạ. Và cái lần nhập viện có thể trước cả ngày 1 tháng 1 năm 2021 ạ. Chúng ta còn 30 giây ạ. Vâng ạ, xin kết thúc cái đánh giá. Xin kết thúc bài post test ạ. Xin mời các anh chị đánh giá lớp học. Mời cái đường link poll ạ.
Vâng, chỉ đợi em một chút ạ. Được chưa Đạt? Thôi em cứ mở lên đi. Về tài liệu tập huấn thì các anh các chị có thể vào đường link để tải về. Xin mời Đạt gửi cái đường link về
Đạt gửi đường link về nhé. Về tài liệu. Đạt hỗ trợ bạn Đỗ Phương Anh làm phone nhé em. Đạt hỗ trợ bạn Ngọc My giúp chị. Đạt ơi, có xóa được cái link Google Form không?
Link Google Form nào chị?
Link Google Form post-test ý. Vì chị không muốn mọi người làm tiếp. Hết giờ rồi.
Cái Google Form đấy thì link đóng lại đi. Google Form đấy là trên Google mà. Còn cái pool của mình là ở trên Zoom. Link đóng lại cho anh nhé.
Ừ.
Em thấy còn khoảng 10-20 người chưa đánh giá. Không biết
Không
là
sao.
có
Không
khó
sao.
khăn gì trong pool không ạ?
Vâng ạ. Chúng ta có thể dừng cái cuộc đánh giá buổi học được rồi ạ. Để xin lưu ý với các anh các chị là buổi học thứ 3 sẽ tiếp tục từ 7 giờ 45 sáng thứ 5 ngày 1 tháng 8 năm 2022 ạ. Link Zoom thì không thay đổi. Và cuối cùng xin được cảm ơn các anh các chị, các đại biểu đã tham gia buổi học này. Chúc anh các chị và đại biểu một ngày làm việc hiệu quả. Xin cảm ơn. Hẹn gặp lại ạ.
Em xin phép kết thúc buổi học luôn, out luôn cho tất cả mọi người.
Cảm ơn Đạt, cảm ơn Linh và cảm ơn cả nhà.